when Takeshi Miyazawa and I co-created Amadeus Cho, nobody was saying, "Hey, can you create a Korean American character for us?" I was just like, I had a chance to create a new Marvel character, and I was like, "Let's do this," and people were like, "Yeah, let's do it. That's cool," and talk drew the hell out of it. Uh, there are definitely times in my career where that's been something you have to fight for. I mean, not so much in comics. Like in comics, generally, I'd push stuff, and people would be like, "Yeah, let's do it." But in the film, in the film business, people had no interest in that, or not.
Really?
I shouldn't say people, but like mainstream companies which had money to put into films, it was vanishingly rare that they would put any money into an Asian American project with Asian American characters. It was just like, I mean, that's very different now. Now,
Don't you just cast Scarlett Johansson? Or
oh God.
uh, welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. Today I'm joined by Greg Pak. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me, man.
I'm very glad to have you on. I want to. We're going to talk about the cookbook you're kickstarting called "Cooking Will Break Your Heart." And the first
Yeah.
thing that strikes me about this book is the title. That sounds like it can only come from somebody who works in comics.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, there's a classic line, "Comics will break your heart," that's been variously attributed to Jack Kirby or Charles Schultz, um, which I actually, a number of years ago, the amazing comics creator Dylan Horrocks drew a picture of Jack Kirby, and he saying that phrase, and he put that up on he was just like selling sketches, and I couldn't believe it, but I was able to nab it for some ludicrously low price, like $40 or $50 or something. So, but I'm very bad at buying original art. Like I never am quick enough and all that kind of stuff. But I got this. Um, but yeah, that's kind of a classic, phrase in comics about the way something you love can can make you cry sometimes. And so when it came time to find a title for this thing, I don't know, that phrase kind of hit me. Um, I This project started off with me posting process photos of my cooking on Twitter. I did a lot of that, particularly during the pandemic, and so people would say, "Hey, when are you going to do a cookbook?" And the answer is now. But then as I started working on it, I realized this isn't just going to be a cookbook. It's going to be about a lot of stuff, because food and cooking, you start talking about cooking and suddenly you're talking about history and family and love and death and everything that matters. Food is just so loaded, and it's so personal. So this has become that kind of a story.
You are a Korean American, right?
Hmm.
Um, the non-Korean part. So, can you elaborate on that
Yeah,
heritage?
yeah. So I'm biracial. My
Yeah.
dad's Korean, and my mom is white, and so I grew up eating all kinds of different stuff. Not even thinking about it as a kid. It was just like stuff we ate. But then looking back, it's like, oh yeah, we ate, we ate this funny mix of stuff. So yeah, I think in the blurb for the book on the Kickstarter, it says like it's a, a Korean American Texan Midwestern cookbook memoir. Because my dad was born in Korea, immigrated to the U.S. through Hawaii, and my parents met in Chicago, and my mom was born and raised in Indiana, and then the family moved to after I grew up in Texas. That's where we grew up. So there's a lot of different sort of geographies and cultures kicking around there, and like I said, like we grew up just eating what we ate, but then at a certain point, I was like looking back on it, I was like, oh yeah, this comes from here and that comes from there, and I've got a taste for this because of this, and uh, it's kind of amazing. You can look at some little thing that a family eats and unpack part of their whole immigration history. So that kind of stuff fascinates me.
Why did your dad immigrate from Korea?
So he came over in 1948, when he was 13 years old with his family. There's a whole saga there, but my grandfather had come to the U.S. before World War II as a seminary student, left the rest of while the rest of the family was still in Korea. They were separated by World War II for years and
Mm.
years and years, and then finally my grandfather was able to bring the rest of the family over. So so that part of the family is actually um, uh, uh, considered very early immigrants, early in terms of Korean American immigration. It's before, I think during that stretch of time when my grandfather came over in particular, there was only like 200 Koreans who were allowed to immigrate to the U.S.
Really?
during that time. Yeah, I mean, I can't remember how many decades that covered or how many years that covered. I remember reading that in a history book about Korean Americans. So I was like, holy cow, that's when my grandfather came over. It's really, I mean, it's kind of remarkable. Post 1965, immigration laws opened up, but before that, it was really, really limited. And so my grandpa, my dad's part of an older generation in terms of immigration.
The white, so your mom is white. Is she just a mix of European ancestry, or?
Yeah, primarily German and English. She actually passed away in August,
I'm sorry about that.
but no, I appreciate it. I mean, that's actually, yeah, I mean, that'll end up being part of the book. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, because every time I cook something, I mean, well, every time I cook, I think of her because, she's the first person, she was the first person who showed me how to do anything in the kitchen. And whenever I cook something that was something she cooked or something that I cooked for her, it's kind of, it's just always there. There's a memory and a presence to all of that. But yeah, so her family, I mean, going back generations, was German and English. And so there's some fun, kind of, funny stuff on that side of the family with the just food that came down through the family. Like there's a very specific kind of thumbprint jelly cookie that my grandmother used to make. And I looked at the recipe card, and it's got some kind of random German sounding name.
Yeah.
Uh, like it looks like uh, Linzenter, Linzenterchen or something like that, which is not a word in German. I actually took German. It's not a word in German. And I was like, what the heck is this? And I was talking to some relatives, and we finally figured out it's just kind of a bastardization of an actual German word, which is Linzertorchen, which is like Linzer tarts, like basically tiny little Linzer cakes, because Linzer cakes have jelly in them. And so these are cookies with some jelly in them.
Yeah.
But like, like it's come down through generations and people just mangled the name. There's some typos in typing up the recipe, and so an R became an N. And I think I mean it's sort of the same way like people's names. Like there are plenty of people with weird family names that just because it just got mixed up during the immigration process. You know what I mean? I think that stuff. Again, this is the weird way in which you get details about families past through what they eat.
But Pak is actually your last name, right? The name
Yes,
is
yeah, yeah,
mangled.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a yeah, and that's a Korean name. That's actually, I mean, because my grandfather immigrated so early, he just made up his own transliteration of the name. That name now, the standard transliteration for that is Park. Like you'll see a lot of Koreans with the last name Park. But it's not really pronounced with a hard R, like Park. You know what I mean? In
Yeah.
Korean, it sounds more like Pak, which is the way my grandfather transliterated it. My dad told me once that my grandfather considered transliterating it when he came to the U.S. as Bahk, but he went with Pak. But it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I know every Korean I've ever met pronounces it as Pak,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
um so you talk about your grandmothers as well, Weechan Weechan Pak and Grace. I hope I pronounced this right.
Riekers.
Riekers.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that you're pronouncing the Korean name right and the German name. You're giving a little pause before diving into that. That's a flip on the way that usually works. A thumbs up. Well done.
I'm Asian.
Exactly right.
And I heard you pronounce it too, so I'm like, all right, that one's easy. And then I get to your white grandmother's name. I was like, what did he say?
Yeah. I'll yeah let him dive in for this one. Yeah.
So how did they inform your food experience?
Well, like there's certain things that each one of them cooked that I just have great nostalgia for. My maternal grandmother used to make these cinnamon rolls, which were incredible. I actually have to dig up that recipe. I need to make that for the book. Now that you're mentioning it, I've really been focusing more on meals as opposed to desserts and things. But when I think about, like, I associate my maternal grandmother in the kitchen mostly with baking. Like she baked this sort of German cookie called Lebkuchen, which I've never had anywhere else but in my family. But I think that's a very common kind of like the German holiday cookie. And I don't even know if it's a holiday cookie, but we had it around the holidays because that's when she would be visiting. So she, she's also she was not like a crunchy hippie type at all. I mean, she was I don't even remember what year she was born in, like 1907 or something like that. But she used to make granola in the oven, like just homemade granola. And I have no idea
It blows my
where
mind
that came
now.
from. You know what I mean? Like where did my Indiana grandma learn about granola? Like, I mean, was that? I don't know, because I guess like we just associate that with, well, now it's just everybody eats granola, but back in the day it was associated, became a pejorative for making fun of like, hippie health food people, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Grandma Reekers was on. She was on that way ahead of way ahead of everybody else. I gotta ask around and find out where that came from. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, uh, uh, she, um, I mean, there's a few things I associate with her. Uh, it was in her house, in her kitchen when we visited Hawaii when I was growing up, where we had uh, the most Korean food we would have. Because I grew up in Dallas, there weren't really any Korean restaurants when I was growing up in Dallas. When we had Asian food, we went to like a Chinese restaurant that was nearby, and then my dad would kind of cook some randomly Korean, seasoned stuff that wasn't really Korean food you'd get anywhere else. You know what I mean? It was just like,
Yeah.
but anyway, but my grandmother would cook japchae, which is like this Korean noodle uh, a dish, and she would. The thing that I really remember is her making mandu, which are the dumplings, Korean dumplings,
Okay.
and she'd do it all from scratch, and mix up the meat, and then she'd get us all to sit around, and we'd fold up the dumpling wrappers around that. She used to, and then she used to make just a real classic Korean home food, which is kind of like whitefish that's in a kind of egg and flour batter, and also zucchini in an egg and flour batter. And it's just sautéed or fried in a pan, and you eat it with you just dip it in soy, like a mix of a little bit of soy sauce and sesame oil, and eat it with rice, and it's incredibly tasty. It's just really good stuff. I mean, it's spectacularly simple, but that just the flavor of that always. I mean, the flavor of that and guava juice take me right back to my grandmother's kitchen in Hawaii. 40 years ago. It's kind of a trip what food does. I mean, I'm sure you've got memories like that of just like food that takes you someplace.
I was actually gonna ask, do you how much how much food do you eat with rice?
I have in my lifetime eaten so much rice. I have a habit of eating a lot of rice, but like I'm of an age now where it's like, oh, you know
Yeah.
what? I should not eat quite so many carbs. You know what I mean? And so I'm actually becoming a little more cognizant of that. In the last few years, I've been doing stuff. I've actually been mixing white rice and brown rice. So I'm eating more brown rice, which is better. And that actually works fine. I don't. I mean, there's certain brands of brown rice, like the Nishiki brown rice, which is kind of pricey, but Nishiki brand brown rice, it actually is really nice and soft and works great with Asian food. But you can also just get regular old grocery store North American grocery store brown rice and mix it with Asian white rice, and that's pretty awesome. But how much food do I eat with rice? I mean, I'll eat just about anything with rice. I mean, we used to joke that, you like in Hawaii, where I had so many relatives when I was growing up, like sometimes you'd go to a potluck and you end up having like spaghetti and then whatever. They'd have all kinds, you'd have a piece of fried chicken, some spaghetti and some white rice. You know what I mean? Like you'd
Yeah.
have rice with everything. But um,
Spaghetti
like
with
I
white
have,
rice is a thing. It's
yeah,
a
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I'll have, I eat rice. Yeah, I mean, my mom used to make my maternal mother. I mean, my maternal mother. What am I saying? My mom used to make my mom, my mom used to make a mushroom sauce chicken dish, which was Campbell's mushroom soup. I mean, it was amazing, really good, and I do a variation of that. But she would. I think she would usually serve that over like egg noodles, kind of like you do a casserole or something like that, and these kind of wide flat egg noodles, and that was great. But like when I do it, I serve it over white rice. I make chili and I eat that over rice. We used to eat that over rice at home too. But yeah, I am trying to actually decrease my rice consumption a little bit
It's a
and
health
increase.
thing.
Yeah, exactly, for health reasons. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't see myself giving it up, but I'm trying to lower and increase my vegetable consumption. I mean, that's a constant thing, right? None of us eat enough vegetables. I eat a
It's
lot of
true.
vegetables, but I think I should probably eat more than I do.
Well, can I tell you a story about having rice?
Yes.
I'm gonna piss so many people off
Oh
because
no.
it's close to Thanksgiving. So I grew up here, but I went to college in the States along with some of my friends, and we were all scattered in different places. Some of us were on the west, some of us were in the east. And the first Thanksgiving, we all met up, right? Because we were like, we don't have family here. Let's just all hang out with each other. So we're making turkey, we're following it to the letter and everything, and then we're eating it, and we're like, this is it. Like this is like we grew up knowing about this. This is it. This is what it tastes like. And then somebody just went, you know what would make this great? Some rice.
Yeah.
So we made
Yeah.
some rice. We had it with turkey. It was like, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, yeah, we can definitely have a little side of rice at Thanksgiving. Why not? Yeah, the traditional Thanksgiving starches are like, potatoes and stuffing, but I've definitely served rice alongside potatoes and stuffing at Thanksgiving.
But it goes
Um,
to what you were saying, right? Because I'm not the palate might not say it's perfect, but for the rest of it was like, well, this is bringing back
yeah,
home memories of
yeah,
home.
yeah.
And that's interesting to me. So I got to ask, with all of these memories, obviously you were living in Texas, elephant in the room, interracial marriage with your
Hmm.
parents. um that cause any problems?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know about I don't know that they had issues as adults. Like they actually have talked about having remarkably few negative reactions from people. They talk about like, I mean, they used to take us on road trips. Like when we were little kids, they took us on road trips throughout the U.S. And they've talked every once in a while about like, uh, you know, realizing somebody was giving them dirty looks, to see this, you know, biracial family and everything. But in their day-to-day lives, uh, I don't think they got that much flack for having a mixed marriage, just walking around and stuff. Uh, but I mean, I definitely, you know, this was, I mean, I definitely got my share of racist, comments and experience, had my share of racist experiences growing up, which are, not that it's a competition, but they're not as horrible as what you hear a lot of people going through. But at the same time, I'm still thinking about them. I mean, literally, you know what I mean? Like, I find like for years I was like, I wasn't that, whatever, like compared to what a lot of people go through, it wasn't that much. But I'm still thinking about it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
45 years later, I remember vividly, like some of this stuff, and it's yeah, I mean, it, it, uh, it, it's awful and it matters and it's still happening.
Yeah, you,
I mean, that's the thing. It's still happening everywhere. So that kind of, it's ugly and bad. I mean, I think that's one of my motivations. Definitely one of my motivations for, the kind of work I've done over the years. I mean, in its quiet way, cooking will break your heart is part of that too. It's, like I've done a lot of work that with Asian, that puts Asian and Asian American characters front and center. Um, Sometimes that stuff is explicitly about whatever that quote unquote Asian or Asian American experience is. Lots of times it's not. Lots of times it's just like people living their lives, but those people that we're watching live their lives happen to be Asian or Asian American, and that informs who they are. But it's not necessarily the central point of the story. But it's real, and that like that just kind of like normalizes seeing other people as main characters. You know what I mean? I think that's incredible. That kind of stuff is also incredibly important. And then there's stuff that that goes deeper in terms of that actual the sort of uh, experiences of specifically being of that race or background in that environment. But yeah, Cooking Will Break Your Heart will delve into that in its own way. Um, but it's funny. I think that even just the fact that I'm a writer comes from that in a way because I
really?
became, yeah, I mean, I became aware at a very young age that I needed to be able to explain myself. Like I needed to be able to tell my story and connect in some way in order to. I mean, this sounds really exaggerated, but I think this is actually the way it worked for me when I was in order to avoid violence. You know what I mean? Like in order to become a target, I had to find a way to connect, or just to freaking open my mouth and not, and be and tell my story, relate to people in some way. Not that I'm literally as a 7-year-old telling my story, but that ability to and oh yeah, and then the other part of it is also about um, just that desire to understand what the hell is going on. You know
Mm,
what I mean?
yeah.
Like that. I think that's that's a huge part of being a writer for me is I'm a writer because I want to try to figure crap out. You know what I mean? Like life is confusing, and there's lots of stuff I want to try to work through, and writing gives me a chance to do that. Writing is thinking, you know,
Yeah.
um, and so I think the fact that I was a biracial kid growing up when I did and where I did um, definitely contributed to that. I mean, it's also because I'm a big nerd and love books, and my mom was a former English teacher and incredible, hugely encouraged her, kids' creative endeavors and read to us all the time and took us to the library constantly and bought us um, like paper and crayons instead of coloring books. You know what I mean? So
It's
I mean,
cool.
so it's a lot of other things too. But
Who would you say is your biggest influence on your writing?
oh wow, um, I don't know who my biggest would be. I mean, I definitely think like folks, writers who made a huge impression on me as a kid, and whose work I still think about to this day include Ray Bradbury.
Hmm.
Sci-fi short film. I remember finding out that Bradbury was born on August 23rd, and so no, he was born on August 22nd, and I was born on August 23rd. And I was like, yeah, good, yeah, I'm coming right in after you. Like, I mean, I literally had that thought when I was a kid. He was, I just, my mom bought me a giant book of his short stories when I was like 12, and I, have, have loved that ever since. Charles Schultz, Peanuts, absolutely had a big influence on me when I was very young. Lloyd Alexander, he wrote The Book of Three, is probably the best known book that he wrote. He wrote the series, The Black Cauldron. Is like
Oh
there's
yeah.
a Disney movie called The Black Cauldron, is based on these books by Lloyd Alexander, which are I think they're just tremendous. They're based on the same sort of set of myths that that Tolkien was inspired by. So there's a lot of parallels between these stories and the Lord of the Rings and everything. Um, but Alexander, I mean, Alexander's books are sort of very consciously for kids. They're like middle grade books. I mean, you'd call them middle grade books now. Back then, they just called them books.
Yeah.
but uh, but uh, but they're just incredibly human and humane and democratic. It's I guess is the way I'd put it. It's kind of interesting. Like there's a it's all this it's the same kind of kings and queens stuff. Of high fantasy, all those tropes and everything, and royalty and all of that. But when you boil it down, the Alexander books really are just about everyday people, and very aggressively and consciously so in the way in the current concerns of the characters and how it all plays out. Anyway, those books had a huge influence on me as a kid. I love Bill Mantlo, comic book
Oh,
writer.
yeah.
He wrote Micronauts back in the day. I loved those toys, Micronauts, and so I was a big sucker
Tragic,
for
tragic story that right
Yes,
there. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. He hit by a hit and run driver, suffered traumatic brain injury in the
Yeah.
90s. Yeah,
Um,
so yeah, the so those are some of the folks who've had a big influence on me over the years. I mean, this sounds so pretentious, but Shakespeare, like Macbeth and King Lear, I think are kind of under my skin, in terms of that kind of big emotional drama, classic, huge emotion.
well, I feel like even if you don't name Shakespeare, the trickle down effect would
Hmm.
eventually get to Shakespeare, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, sure.
So, you mentioned, being able to represent yourself, and I was talking to somebody at one point, and it was off the records. I won't mention who this person was, but he said that he had a conversation with you at one point, and you were talking about representation in comic books, and a lot of fans have a conception that when you're introducing minority characters or more women or whatever into comic books, uh, it's a company directive, it's a marketing demand, it's being forced or whatever. But this person I was talking to basically said, for example, you will put in many Asian or Asian American characters in your books because you are Asian American, and therefore you're drawing from your own experiences. So how much of that is in fact you, and is there any truth to it being a company directive at most?
I mean, you look at if you look at my career from the beginning, the very first stuff that I put out in the world as a, I mean, I back in 1991, I did a weekly cartoon for the, or comic strip for the Korea Times Korea Times New York English edition. And it was called American Soul. It was like Korean American family.
Seoul, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Seoul, Korean American family comic strip. The short films that I made when I was a student at NYU had Asian American characters. Yeah, I mean it's been something I've cared about for years. I mean I've been compelled by and deeply interested in supporting you know getting different faces up on the big screen and in comics and in books, of all different kinds for my whole career. And I've worked on other kinds of, you know, books with other kinds of representation. Like I wrote the Magneto Testament book, which was Magneto's origin story,
Yeah.
which was basically the story of a Jewish kid trying to keep his family alive during the Holocaust, the rise of the Nazis in the Holocaust. And I was lucky enough to get pulled on board to write the Storm book as well. And so I've had an interest in this, but yeah, in particular, yeah, I mean, I've certainly written from my experience and also just my interests and there are a lot of Asian and Asian American characters and stories that I've contributed to over the years. So that that kind of thing is, yeah, that definitely comes from me. I will say, and so it's not like, you know, definitely in 2005, or when when Takeshi Miyazawa and I co-created Amadeus Cho, nobody was saying, "Hey, can you create a Korean American character for us?" I was just like, I had a chance to create a new Marvel character, and I was like, "Let's do this," and people were like, "Yeah, let's do it. That's cool," and talk drew the hell out of it. Uh, there are definitely times in my career where that's been something you have to fight for. I mean, not so much in comics. Like in comics, generally, I'd push stuff, and people would be like, "Yeah, let's do it." But in the film, in the film business, people had no interest in that, or not.
Really?
I shouldn't say people, but like mainstream companies, which had money to put into films, it was vanishingly rare that they would put any money into an Asian American project with Asian American characters. It was just like, I mean, that's very different now. Now,
Don't you just cast Scarlett Johansson? Or
oh God. I mean, but now, I mean, like for the first time, just about now, in life, there are companies with money that are actively looking to put out projects with Asian and Asian American characters. So there's just been a too many projects over the last 5 to 6 years that have been wildly successful and made companies a lot of money. So that now more companies are realizing, oh, we can make money by doing this, and so now sometimes they're actively looking for stuff, which is great. you know. But this was not a that was not the typical experience for the first 2.5 decades of my career.
you had to fight for it. How much of
Yeah.
that is, and I want to know your feelings on this. How much of that is the fact that in the last 10 or so years, maybe not even 10, Korean pop culture has just exploded?
Oh yeah. No. I mean, yeah. It's. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's a big deal. It's a big deal internationally. You know what I mean? Like, and when it becomes undeniable that there's a market, an international market, and a domestic U.S. market that is ready to pay real money for projects that have Asian people in them, it changes things. So that's, I mean, that's great. Um, uh, I mean, that goes hand in hand with generations of Asian American creators fighting by hook and by crook to get projects made and to prove that they can go over. I mean, there's generations of filmmakers and writers and artists who have been doing stuff and laying the groundwork for all of this for years. There's organizations like Asian Cinevision in New York and Visual Communications in LA and CAM in San Francisco. These different Asian American media organizations that have put on film festivals for decades now, supported generations of Asian and Asian American, or Asian American and Asian filmmakers. And like a lot of the folks who are now getting a shot at getting some Hollywood money to make their projects, they came up through those organizations. They were supported by those organizations, for years in terms of like visibility and putting that those festivals were a big deal, are a big deal. So none of this happens in a vacuum. It's not like overnight suddenly one thing happens and then now all the doors are flung wide. It's like a whole bunch of people working in a whole bunch of different ways and the audience growing. I used to say 15 years ago, literally, I would say in 15 years, it's going to become undeniable that there's money to be made here.
Of course.
But I don't have to wait 15 years. So I'm thrilled that it's happening now. I'm still resentful of the fact that we've had to wait so long.
How would you respond to the people who are all saying, who are like, oh, it's forced, it never used to be like this? Or
I don't respond to them. I'm not involved in those conversations, and I'm not willing to entertain those kind of conversations. They're not worth my time. But I don't fight on the internet. You know what I
okay,
mean? Like I literally don't have time for it. I'm here to make cool stuff, and for folks who want to read some cool stuff, that's what I'm here to do. And so I'm trying to throw all my energy towards that, nurturing that positive audience. Like that's It's the only way that makes sense for me to make my way through the world. Find the people who want the stuff you're doing and get them on board.
Please tell me you watch K dramas.
I have not watched a lot. I have watched some, but I haven't watched a ton. So I'm behind, painfully behind on a huge amount of film and TV stuff in general because I'm
Okay,
always on deadline. So
I
I just don't have enough
understand.
time. But yeah, I mean I've watched some, but not, I watched Squid Games. I know that's a Netflix thing as opposed to produced originally as a K drama, a traditional K drama. But what are you thinking of in general, or what are you thinking about?
'Cause I was gonna ask you about like the general structure of a K drama. You know how there's all these flashbacks in it. So there's a very layered structure in a lot of them that I'm like, this surprises me, and I don't know why it does.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I can't speak to that exactly. I mean, I haven't, I don't know that I'm enough of an expert to have a really informed opinion on that. I do know that or one thing that I have that I love about a lot of Korean film and television stuff is that there's a kind of fearlessness and there's a kind of like we're just going to try, we're just going to do some stuff. You know what I mean? That is incredibly exciting and refreshing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's also like I mean, and you also see this in some other like you can see this in like Hong Kong, like 90s Hong Kong cinema too. But there's also like this kind of fearless mixing of tone, where you can sometimes go from really kind of slapstick, almost cartoony moments to really serious dramatic moments. You know what I mean? And it just works. You know what I mean? Like they're not they're not scared of having pretty wide tonal shifts throughout the
yeah.
course of a show or a series.
Even within like a 10-minute span,
Yeah, yeah,
it'll just
yeah, yeah.
completely shift. Yeah, my
I
only
mean, it's a.
gripe. Yeah,
No, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
now my only gripe about K dramas is that each episode is so long it may as well be a movie, and that's about it. Did your parents teach each other how to cook their own specific cuisines?
I'm trying to figure that out. I need to talk to my dad about that. I found I was going through my mom's index card. She's got an index card recipe box, and this old recipe box with these kind of beautiful little flowers painted on it and everything. But I was flipping through that, and I saw that she had a whole little section with Korean food, with handwritten recipes, and I need to find out where those came from. Like, did she get those? Did my dad help her with those? Did she get those directly from my grandma? Did she just go to the library and do some research, back in 1970 whatever, and find some Korean recipes and transcribe them or whatever? I don't know. I don't know. I need to to figure out where that came from.
So does your
Um,
dad also cook?
Not, I mean, so there would be times, particularly like when my mom was out of town for whatever reason, when my dad would get in the kitchen and do some cooking. Um, there's like one thing that, and I need to get to the bottom of this too. There was like one sort of Korean dish that he would make, which had like layers of like spinach or other kind of greenery and meat, and then lots of gochujang, which is that Korean red pepper paste. Um, and But it like I've never seen that anywhere else. That specific combo that he did. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I kind of think he just made it up. You know what I mean? I think he was like, he managed to find gochujang in somewhere. Like there must have been a Korean grocer in Dallas somewhere where he found this gochujang, and then and then he kind of just put stuff together to kind of get to those flavors that he remembered and liked. But I need to actually sit him down and find out what the story is behind that.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's kind of how I cook.
Yeah, 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 right. Which I think is totally great. You know what I mean? Like there's something really endearing about that. He would also. I realized also that I inherited a real love for what do you call it, for Napa cabbage from my dad. Um, like Napa cabbage is like the crispy, really crispy Chinese cabbage. And like if you go to a Korean restaurant and order kalbi now, the Korean short rib barbecue or barbecued short rib, you usually get served romaine lettuce.
Yeah.
You wrap it in romaine lettuce. But I always have that with Napa cabbage. It was just because I like that combo, and I realized that, oh yeah, I got that from my dad, because my dad would, when I was growing up, he'd get Napa cabbage and he'd like put just straight gochujang on it with rice and just eat that like for and so I ended up developing the same kind of taste for that, and so I use that when I have kalbi. But I was talking to my dad about that, and I was like, yeah, why specifically Napa cabbage? Like most, like you go to a restaurant now and they serve kalbi with romaine, and he was like, well, we he couldn't remember if they even had romaine when he was growing up in Korea, in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
So that, I
Wow.
mean, it may just be because they only had Napa cabbage at the time, right? And so that's his nostalgia food. That's what he likes, and then I've inherited that from him. Like Gen X inheriting that taste from Silent Generation. You know what I mean? Like so, you again, it's like the food shows you the immigration patterns of your family. The food that something as simple as like what kind of leafy green you like to eat your kalbi with. There's a story behind that.
Speaking of the stories behind it, you are telling the stories in a variety of ways. So how much, I'm the comics cube. So how much of the book is comics?
It's gonna be it's yeah, the majority is gonna be recipes, photos, and prose, but there definitely will be comics and poetry in there as
Mm-hmm.
well, believe it or not. I don't know exactly what the ratios are going to be. Um, I have been thinking, I've got this crazy plan to do some sort of like instructional comics, because I realized
Oh, cool.
I want to do a thing where I'm showing how to cut up a chicken. But even people who like to cook don't necessarily want to look at, you know, photos of glistening meat. You know what I mean? Like some people are, that's some people don't really love that. But so that feels like a perfect thing to do as a little comic strip. You know what I mean? And find a way to do it sort of, fun, and make it fun and personal at the same time. But so there's some stuff like that that I'm rolling around and thinking about. And then there's stuff that I drew years ago. I think there's some examples of that on the Kickstarter page of like comics that I drew in the past that have some kind of food hook to them.
Quite a bit, yeah. So you're doing the drawings yourselves.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, that's kind of the fun of this whole Kickstarter thing, is that it gives, Kickstarter enables a really quirky kind of 100% independent personal project like this to just become real. You know what I mean? And I think part of this is like, in a way, this is almost like a zine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like almost like collage style. Like here's riffing on a theme, but it's gonna have I want it to have a sort of like a bit of a handmade, personal feel. So drawing all this stuff in my, kind of limited but hopefully expressive and fun cartoony style will work for folks.
So right now, you actually have 565 backers at this point in time as we are recording. You got 18
Nice.
days left to go. You're actually $13,284 away, ahead of your goal.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I
It's
really appreciate
pretty
everybody who's jumped
awesome.
on board, and I should say I'm really grateful to you for pulling me in here, because it means a lot when folks are, willing to talk about these kinds of, smaller, quirky, or personal projects. So I thank you very much for
I love food and I love comics. So,
that.
I'll just read through the rewards really quickly. If you pledge $14 or more, you'll get the book in a PDF form. $20 or more, you'll get the digital PDF and some cool physical stickers. Um, $27, you'll get the PDF and the hardcover of The Princess Who Saved Her Friends.
Mhm.
um, $28, which is $1 away from the last one. Um, is there
Right.
is there a difference here?
Oh yeah, The Princess Who Saved Herself. We did two of these princess books with Takeshi
Ah, the
Miyazawa
Princess Who
and
Saved
Jonathan
Herself.
Coulton.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Um, $48, you'll get both the Princess hardcovers, and $50, you'll get the ABC Disgusting variant along with a digital PDF of this book.
Mhm.
Um, and then $150 or more, you'll get the PDF plus an original portrait of your pet drawn and signed by you, Greg Pak.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I can't draw everything, but I'm pretty good at drawing animals. And so over the years, I've done a few different fundraisers for nonprofits where I'll draw people's pets, and those went over really well. So I figured I'd do that here.
How come you're not publishing this book in hardcover or in
Oh,
physical form?
well, we got so many supply chain issues right now, and
Ah,
the book's not gonna be ready to ship until next year, and I'm not comfortable trying to predict what it'll cost to get it printed and shipped now. You know what I mean? So it just it's I felt like just going digital at first made the most sense. People seem to be really happy with it. I mean, I've had a few people ask, well, I mean, everybody loves physical books and particularly cookbooks and comics. So I knew that would, there's going to be a certain number of people who are like, no, wait, maybe, if he does a physical edition later, I'll come on board then, and that's fine. But I kind of felt like I could probably get enough folks who were interested in getting it digitally to make it happen now. And then hopefully next year we'll be able to, when it's all done and the time frame won't be stretched out, I'll be able to kind of figure out, like, maybe I'll do another Kickstarter next year, which is just for physical copies. Figure out a way to throw a bone to the folks who kicked in on the first one, so it's they get a little bonus when if they support that. Or maybe I'll end up finding a traditional publisher to do the physical version of it at some point. So I mean that would also be cool.
that
So
would be
we'll see.
very cool. Do you have anything else you want to say about Cooking Will Break Your Heart?
No, that's yeah. I mean, I just yeah go to Kickstarter and check it out. Just type in "Cooking Will Break Your Heart" in that subject field or in that search window. You can also go to cookingwillbreakyourheart.com. Just one long word, cookingwillbreakyourheart.com, and that'll point you right to the page.
Awesome. Before we wrap, I want to thank you for a couple of things. My my family's collective favorite Marvel movie is Thor Ragnarok,
Oh, hey.
which takes place, which takes a huge part from your run on the Hulk.
Oh, thank you so much.
So
Yeah, well, I feel almost goofy taking credit because I didn't make the movie, but yeah, the Planet Hulk comics certainly contributed towards that. So thank you very much. I'll take all that credit. Sure.
and of course, thank you for co-creating Wave.
Oh, thank you. That was a huge amount of fun. Linnell Yu is co-creator on that. For those who don't know, Wave is a Filipina superhero we created for the War of the Realms New Agents of Atlas book a few years back. Gosh, that is a few years back now already, isn't that? Is that two
Yes,
years ago now?
I
Or is
think
that
it's
even
like
3 years
3
ago?
years ago. Yeah, 2018.
Wow, wow. But yeah, there was. I mean, I was doing this book that was going to be a big Pan Asian book with a bunch of different characters. I mean, it was part of a big Marvel event, and a bunch of it was going to like there was a sort of a subplot in this big event where this basically an evil Norse demon was going to be attacking Asia,
Yeah.
and so this was a great excuse to kind of create this new team with a bunch of Asian and Asian American heroes to kind of defend the region. And I was looking at this, this lineup, and most of these pre-existing characters were East Asian. I was like, we gotta mix that up. We gotta get some Southeast Asian representation, and specifically some Filipino representation. I mean, um, there just had not been enough in terms of superheroes that were, from the Philippines or of Filipino descent. And folks at Marvel was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And I was like, "Can we get, you know, artist on board, like maybe, and they were like, Lanil, you? And I was like, yes. And they pulled, so Lanil came on board to design the character, and it was, and we, and we, we co-created this character, and um, it was the response was overwhelming. So I really appreciate it. I'm glad that the character resonated with you, and grateful to everybody who supported that. It was mind blowing. I mean, that I've never seen. Like I think it was literally bigger in terms of just like the number of people who got excited about it and started like posting about it all over the place. It was bigger than like when I started writing Darth Vader. You know what I mean? It was
Oh,
like it
you
was
have no
enormous.
idea.
Oh man.
Lines around the corner from the
Oh
comic
yeah,
shop.
right. I mean, there were comic shops, and yeah, there was Comic Odyssey, right? Comics
Yeah.
Odyssey in the Philippines.
Comic
Like they
Odyssey,
did
yeah.
Comic Odyssey. They did
Oh my
a
goodness.
a special variant cover, and it was yeah, they told me that issue sold more than any other comic they'd ever sold before, which
Yeah.
blew my mind.
It's just there's a market. That's the point, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's a
yeah.
market.
Exactly. So, oh yeah, and then they the Marvel Games people put her in a couple of Marvel games. You know what I mean? It's exciting, So hopefully in the fullness of time, more stuff will happen with that.
Getting arguably the most commercially successful Filipino artist ever to design this Filipino character seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
why not? He's like one of Marvel's. He's a he's a beloved Marvel artist. We're doing this for Marvel Comics, and yeah, no, it all came together so well. And yeah, he really brought it. You know what I mean? Like he put in details. I'm Korean American. You know what I mean? Like I pay attention, and but there are elements that are only going to come when you bring in folks of like
Yeah.
Only with Linnell could that character have become what she became. So I'm just enormously grateful.
And that's another thing too, right? That I think a lot of people who don't understand representation don't get is when we say Asian, we mean like a wide variety of people.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right.
Exactly. No, it's a real Pan Asian experience. I think. Um, yeah, on that team, like I've done a few different books that have, you know, team ups. I mean, I did this thing called the Protectors that were
Yeah.
a team called the Protectors that were part of the Totally Awesome Hulk book for a while, and yeah, we had Kamala Khan in there, who's South Asian, and it was that's that's I think when you're talking about this kind of stuff, it's important to remember how broad this worldwide, how broad the diaspora is, how broad the worldwide community is, and all of that. And that's not to say that that's a that and to recognize the diversity there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just important.
What was the impetus for making Wave? Because I know the temptation probably would have just simply been to make her somebody from Manila, right?
Oh yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm always interested in underdogs. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so having her not be from the big city felt like the more interesting move.
Yeah.
Um, and like I mean, Lanil was really excited because like he's from the same place Wave is. You know what I mean? So when he had a chance to do that, he was like, yeah. Um, but yeah, so um, but yeah, I always gravitate towards the underdogs. So, and again, like diversity within diversity, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like there's people with no matter what you're doing, people will have people will have one conception of what a character of some background will be like, but there's actually incredible diversity within every different sort of community, and so finding a way to reflect that, to make it more specific, and I think that always helps.
Can I just also say it was genius to make her a swimmer?
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, that was also a thing. Like when you think about, I didn't want to just make her like a Captain America for the Philippines. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think there's been a tendency in American comics when they do international heroes, they just make them patriotic heroes, which is fine, but that's not, like I,
It
I,
wouldn't
I,
be the case.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the only way, or necessarily the most interesting way to do these things. Like I when I was talking about it, I was like, let's make her more like, more like, I mean, not that her powers are like this, but more like a like the Spider-Man of the Philippines. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the underdog who's not part of that, because there already was this, this team, this kind of like basically the Philippine Avengers, that
Yeah.
had been created in the past, Triumph Division, right?
Yeah.
And there was a character called Red Feather who is like the basically the Captain America type. So it's like, that we don't need to do. What we need to do is find somebody who's on the outside of that, kind of like Spider-Man. I mean, Spider-Man often is a member of the Avengers, but traditionally Spider-Man is like, he's just like this dude off on the side doing his own thing, and he's kind of a problem for other people sometimes. And so that seemed like a more interesting way to play Wave. But then yeah, it became a struggle. Like what kind of powers are we going to do here? I also wanted to avoid kind of having magic or mystical or sort of like
Ah,
ghost powers or something like that, which are all cool. But I just have seen, I mean, I think I've just seen a lot of other characters, particularly from Asian countries, that have kind of mythology based powers. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And there were a lot of characters like that in this book that I was specifically working with. Again, very cool, but I don't want everybody to have to be like that. You know what I mean? So, uh, and then I was like, I mean, this is a country. There's water is a big deal here in this
Exactly.
country, So it
She's
just kind of
literally
came.
from an island.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So it kind of made sense. I'm glad
uh
it.
so yeah, because when Filipinos create comic books, with no complaints from me, but it is true. We default to magic, pre-colonial Filipino magic. So
Which, like I say, that's awesome. You know what I
yeah,
mean? But for this one, I wanted to take it a little, do a little something different. So I'm glad it worked for you, man.
I'm really glad. So
Yeah,
thank you so much. Thanks and good luck with Cooking Will Break Your Heart.
I
And I'll let you
appreciate
know
it.
when this is up.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.